Just like you. For how long must I wait? I know there's something wrong. Your concrete heart isn't beating, and I've tried to make it come alive. No shadows, just red lights. Now I'm here to rescue you.
Mirror's Edge is a title that doesn't matter. What matters is its soul, and its soul was just sung. Still alive. That's what it felt like to play, but it's also what it meant in the industry. Look at me. I can be different, it said. I can still be different when being different was meaningful in a world of being the same. Its art style was an inversion of 7th generation trends, but its mechanical nonconformity still reverberates through the industry today. A breakthrough in first-person movement, the true first-strand type game, and so the first to be controversial. But you wouldn't know it now. Over time, the imperfections of Mirror's Edge have faded from the public consciousness. Its reputation grows further from its actual merit with every passing year. Why? Because the soul that made it worthy of respect then is more yearned for now than ever. We want Still Alive in our games. That's why a quiet desire for a sequel grew into a feverish longing. Still Alive is why Mirror's Edge mattered. Still Alive will show us why our begging was answered with a reboot instead.
We set out to bring Mirror's Edge to a new generation of gamers. Welcome to Mirror's Edge Catalyst.
Catalyst. We waited 8 years. It's as if it never came out. This game inspired nothing. Nothing but a heated debate for those who remember it exists. Not as to if it failed, but as to if it deserved to. Everyone has their take. Like this one, I can't think of anything else that made so many bad choices in such a small package. But I like it. I'd play it again. And I know I'm not alone. Still Alive is where the rabbit hole began. There's a reason those two words were chosen. Video games are a multimedia art form. Mirror's Edge is what you get when they come together in harmony to create the same feeling. Aliveness, or to be specific, the fantasy of the parkour runner. Danger, thrill, energy, rebellion. Verticality cohered with the sound design of wind, breath, and footfall, with energetic music, with graceful but impactful first-person animation, and with the most important part of all. Mirror's Edge was symbolic. Simple objects devoid of nuance beyond their meaning collectively composed a mythologization of parkour itself, where a bright human presence whose only two character traits were love and willpower, tattooed with the icon of a bird, and named after a purely human quality, faith, engaged in a never-ending act of rebellion by treating a series of colossal, empty symbols of material power as her playground. The city kept itself inspecific, blending east with west and omitting fictional details to stay widely relatable. There was no world building, no character depth, no narrative flesh, but we understood its meaning without it ever saying a word. And then the problems started. You can guess why. Mirror's Edge wanted a conventional story, and being deliberately one-dimensional tends to be a downside when it comes to emotional connection. That did not kill its narrative, but it certainly held it back, and a sequel would be born in the same handcuffs. You can go to a new city, introduce a new runner, but that's less of a Mirror's Edge 2 than a reboot would be, and building beyond the borders the first game set risks killing its symbolic weight in retrospect. These advertisements are not believable, but we accept them because we know what they mean. Any other explanation or expecting us to believe they exist within a larger universe is a tough sell, like suggesting a city that needed to avoid fictionalization is one among many in a fully fictionalized universe. Go too far and you lose its soul. Stay put and you're still in prison in more ways than you'd think. The worst part is the ugly, pretty truth that exciting new visuals sell a game and there is nowhere you can go from a perfectly realized vision. Mirror's Edge was as simple as it could be. You can't change that. But it also meant the tech of 2008 made it just about as crisp as it could be too. And visuals sell a game. Take next-gen tech to flat colors and you get slightly sharper flat colors. This is Mirror's Edge rendered in Unreal Engine 5. Did you even notice the difference? Catalyst is a reboot because it keeps Mirror's Edge's recognizable icons while escaping its symbolic prison. It was free to build something that would sell. In 2021, I wrote a script for Mirror's Edge Catalyst. You knew that. Point is, I wrote it because I already had one from 2 years before. Something drew me to it. A simple, innocuous YouTube video, a tour of its city, where at day, shapeless godlight echoed infinitely from reflection to reflection in a marriage of the sun and the simple white wall that earned the name Glass. And at night, the sci-fi cities of our desktop wallpapers came to life, a world you could touch and feel that earned our hearts. Attractive? No. This was gravity, an inescapable pull that became a problem as the mechanics buckled under overwhelming pressure to stop paying attention. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. The city center is ablaze with life, and few of its skeletal walkways have guardrails, but what better place is there to stare into the bewitching bare chaos? It's all too easy to miss the gap coming up for the heavenscape to the side. Unless you count walking into transparent panes, that's the true mechanical twist of Regatta Bay, where a shoal of petals sink in serenity through the still ocean air. A Garden of Eden, fused with only enough artifice to make our world work within theirs. For every blossoming tree, a fiberweave canopy, glass and the glassy waterfall, marble and the uncut rock. In the shimmering heights and the crystal valley, constellations of neons, green space and the dotted lights of drones compose a technicolor night sky to complement the bay's gated paradise. Glass is the heavens brought down to earth. And that's exactly my point. In simply describing it to you, I've proven that it varies itself as a sci-fi city well. In simply showing, you've seen its remarkable beauty. But there is a deeper pattern, did you see? That there is nothing but beauty. Big Bobby B, aka Robert Briscoe, aka the talent behind Mirror's Edge's visuals at their best, said on first glance at Catalyst's trailer, "Every game today wants to look like it's shot through Michael Bay's sunglasses or J.J. Abrams' arsehole. Mirror's Edge wasn't shot through a camera lens, but someone's eyes." He's right. Catalyst isn't concerned with visceral reality. It's a movie, a dream, with wild bleeding, rainbow diffractions and lens flare. In a similar way, Catalyst had no less control than Mirror's Edge over where the city would take you, but instead of distinct settings that represent the power we're fighting against, we see chaotic amalgamations of things that look good. Serene living space is accessed by an incomprehensible jumble of water fixtures and art exhibits. Even the city center itself is a blend of meek, white roofing spread thinly, widely, and nebulously. Undeniably crisp, but not meaningful. And in many places, Glass doesn't even bother with a veil of logic. Why are there networks of pipes in square, transparent housing? Why are there high-tech displays on random, insignificant panels? Why do communications antenna have Logitech gamer lighting and spinning buzzsaws inside it? Why are 500-inch widescreens pointing at blank fucking walls where no one could see it? Oh God, make it stop! Why in the fuck does the game's most important access ladder have purple light strips to the side? As if Linus Sebastian was their architect and a maintenance hatch was part of the exhibits. The thought and creativity of Glass's technology doesn't extend far beyond what can make it look good in photo mode. Geography is easier to forgive, gameplay begs impractical architecture, and DICE don't get enough praise for designing a city that so clearly communicates what you can and can't do. Your options are always clear, that allows you to make choices on the fly, but necessary sacrifices for gameplay aren't what takes a sledgehammer to the immersion. Have a look at this. Okay. So, you got your definitely practical 2-inch roof pool, you got your fucking Minecraft Lovecraft crossover event, you got your dummy thick OLED reminding us what water looks like, in case you forgot. But what you really need to see is that you can only properly see all this together from right here. It was designed for a human presence, right? So, why is it surrounded by unmarked drops? Why here, on Bryson's reception area, in the midst of what resembles a fucking clipping disaster, is there a slippery, wet pathway to certain death on 2 of its 4 sides? Is this, or is this not, a scattering of seats and tables? What's that? What happens when a girl checks my subscriber count? At the sacrifice of meaning, this was meant to look complex and appealing, but my suspension of disbelief is as broken as my bones, forcing glass to sit on the mirror's edge between an engrossing sci-fi metropolis and a tech demo. But we haven't just lost coherency. We haven't just lost symbols of power. We've lost a meaningful visual representation of the fiction. Jesus. Would any player truly view this city as dystopian, even as some underlying corruption, if they weren't told it was meant to be? I said, that every aspect of Catalyst feels like it was made in isolation, and I never fully understood what I meant until Faith said this.
I've never seen this many trees before. It's beautiful here.
After just having walked through this, it appears the writers were as fooled as me, assuming that a supposedly dystopian future was actually going to look like one. That there is a suffering low-caste is nothing more than words, and what can words do against the power of what we see and feel? The city is more alive than Faith is. Drones buzz through the streets, conversations can be heard muffled in houses, like city-wide announcements in the distance. Beaming news flashes are the sound of hundreds of cars echoing up from below. Levels direct the player through living space, whose residents can be seen in person or in great number from great distance or through thin transparent panes. The glass that separates our world from theirs is a distinction the glass we know seamlessly obscures. It burns with life and lacks even the few representations of corporate deadness the first game had. Whitewashed trees are replaced with the blossoming orchards of Shangri bollocking La. The effect is polar. Two-tone billboards are replaced with vast, fully rendered William boards whose representation of consumerism goes as far as 1 perfume brand, some headphones, and 2 jackets, but most of which display nothing more than pretty pictures. Again, the opposite effect. This is what Catalyst has to remind you it's a dystopia. Like tattooing damaged on Joker's forehead, it's one step away from DICE sticking a post-it note to the city as a reminder. This is the soundtrack you hear in the bay. Are you kidding me? I don't believe there is nuance beneath the surface. There is only the pretty face, only the sheep's clothing, the uncompromising reflection of our own utopian dreams, the gleaming white paradise we like to attribute to alien civilizations rather than our own. So I'll cut to the real question. In what way does the setting contribute to the experience of Catalyst beyond just looking good? Graphics don't make parkour feel more thrilling. Verticality might. Mirror's Edge knew that. Catalyst has forgotten. But Assassin's Creed 2 mastered it. The system was relatively challenging, that was tense. But what we're here to see, haha, is that. Few other games who play with height quantify it quite like Florence did. Interesting, isn't it? That one of the most common complaints with Catalyst is that we hardly got to see the streets of glass. Doesn't seem like this should be such a big deal. But it is. We yearn for perspective. Being on top is meaningful when you've seen what it's like to be low, as true for the story as it is for the level design. Climbing the tallest tower in Florence and looking out over your home. Man, it's unforgettable. Because of perspective. Interior space with quantified walls and roofs is perspective inexorably built in, which is how the Basilica of St. Mary the Flower makes Vertigo its plaything. Mirror's Edge played too. The storm drain, the atrium, the pit. This was where Mirror's Edge was at its most thrilling. In Catalyst, there are beautiful peaks above the baseline, but the baseline varies from weak to non-existent, instead of great jumps to cross vast gaps that might just kill you if you're not careful. When you can see the heights, Rajata Bay, the city center, they're off to the side, or divorced from risk by the QuickTime Magro. At its worst, glass will enclose your view in spaces that don't even speak an implication of their height. We could be 2 stories up, or 2,000. You'll know which, most of the time, thanks to small gaps obscured in the play space. Sometimes it'll be a short fall, sometimes it'll lead to a new area, and sometimes it'll just kill you. Am I meant to slow down to find out which? This is Catalyst's leading treatment of verticality. None of the fear, but sometimes a punishment. 10 seconds of loading screen, because it's on Frostbite, because it's just so graphically advanced, because its high-resolution textures are more important than you. And at times, Catalyst would rather be gawked at than played. The game's toughest trials require the boldest choices. What could discourage experimentation more than a 10-second loading screen for an unsuccessful result? One by one, every aspect of visual design that contributed to a harmonized parkour fantasy has been complexified into empty, pretty meaninglessness. The bimboification of Mirror's Edge is absolute. Where's still alive in Glass? Is this a parkour game, or is it a game with parkour? And the examples we've seen could fill 1,000 lofty towers. But gameplay is where Catalyst's failure to produce a harmonized experience will complete. This game feels fucking incredible. Now that's a plot twist. Bear with me, because it's ad time. I get offers all the time from billionaires who promise to make me rich if I take their daughter's virginity, but I turn those down because I have standards. That's why today's sponsor is myself. If you're like me, then you wouldn't be seen dead in public without your favorite item of YouTuber merch. Everyone loves cool shirts, where you can buy classics, such as the Benny Shappy Slappy tee and the Met Gala's own Danny DeVito. But I've taken the opposite approach. My shirts don't exactly scream YouTuber merch. In fact, they don't scream anything, because screaming is for virgins and my shirts will soon fix that. We sell to both unisex and women, so if you're either of those genders, infinite Tinder matches await. Introducing! The Whitelight pinup girl shirt is so astoundingly attractive that the people around you will react with exactly the expression you're looking at. This blend of pop art and Whitelight chic has been officially recommended by over 1 self-appointed fashion expert. Enjoy my artistic genius in purple, blue, and not at all like a game I may or may not have made a video on. Sponsoring myself helps. Just like my fantastic patrons, it helps with control, schedules, and the videos themselves. We've got a wonderful shop set up already at whitelight.store, and more designs in the works. Because eventually, I'd like this to be the way forward. Here at Whitelight, we don't just deal in drip. We're in the tropical storm business, and I want nothing to stand between you, better videos, and most importantly, styling on these hoes. Game Feel is about making the control of a character feel good. It's a science that Mario, Celeste, and Spider-Man understand, but as no one had expanded first-person movement, no one had ever mastered first-person game feel until DICE. Starter pistols fire and momentum-based sprint speed is the first factor in play. Mirror's Edge increases your speed the longer you run uninterrupted, but vaulting knee-high objects gets you a boost. In the Symbol City, that was incentive for precision, because if you made a mistake, you'd lose your momentum, and a chain of precision was called flow. In Glass, things have changed. You press a button. Instant top speed. No cooldown. Explain that. Oh, it removes any downside to making spontaneous course corrections. Good for open world, but then why lug around the corpse of the mechanic? Game Feel, because going fast is meaningful if you have to stop yourself from going slow. Because some form of acceleration is a star player in good Game Feel. Check out the vents. You see how Faith's crawl speed now has a pronounced acceleration phase? It feels good. I think the focus shifted. Precision as necessity leaves, acceleration stays. It works. Camera shake cleanly quantifies the forces on Faith's body, in harmony with the excellent breathwork and wind effects that believably blur your vision at high speeds. Faith connects to her mark with an electric magnetism. There's an audible clap as she snaps to a pole, and the certainty of motion is smoothly displayed in animation. In direct contrast, Faith becomes like water to anything she needs to smoothly traverse, as her arms and legs move just enough to believably flow over that small ledge. Being stuck on the environment is a thing of the past, like recovery rolls that sap momentum. Catalyst flows uninterrupted, and even accounts for backwards momentum in the roll, where downforce is neatly converted to a dip in Faith's knees as she hits the ground. Stumbles and falls are simulated with a realism that sweeps me off my feet to this day. It's a simple trick. If Faith hits a surface with enough force, she stumbles, but you're still in control. If you move off the surface to fall again, the stumble simulates an uncontrolled trip and has her collapse onto the floor. It's simple, it's brilliant. Making a mistake in Catalyst is its own reward. I couldn't name a flaw with it if I tried. Now it's time for the twist. All of that is true, and the first game was more thrilling. A feeling can only do so much without the support of the mechanics. Seeing is believing, but is believing accurate to the nearest centimeter? In Mirror's Edge, there were times it had to be. Without my inbuilt human senses, a first-person perspective on a 2D screen could become an unfair handicap. Recommended treatment? A snap feature? Something that'd account for coming just a little short. Catalyst forgot to read the warning label. This is a game OD'd on magnetism that practically plays itself, as the hardest thing to do now is miss. There was never challenge in using an interactable. Half the challenge was getting to it. Without that, what does Catalyst have to resort to for compelling gameplay? Open world pathfinding? Ha! You know as well as I do that's not true. What about the choice of which interactables to use? The choice between relevant, balanced options is the definition of depth, and DICE get full marks for providing so many possibilities. The potentials in Glass's dense play space are incalculable. Options? Present. Balance? There was a time springboards were a gift. Now, you can spring from any knee-high surface of many knee-high surfaces. Then why wouldn't I? If there's a nearby chance, I'll always take it. It'll always be the best play. And though the snap combined with the flexibility of the springboard makes on-the-fly optimizations easier than ever, how can that help us if you have no motive to make those optimizations? What you have is an automatic GPS. The open world's design makes all but certain you'll never question. I speak a lot about intrinsic motivation. This is a game where if you can't bring some subjective driving force to occasionally experiment, your gameplay will never even jolt above a zombified baseline. Runner's vision, a chainmail safety net, and an easy choice. What do they call it? A no-brainer? Sounds about right. The three tightropes that exist in Glass are a monument to Catalyst's design, both because there's three, and because they are the way they are. Oh shit, whoa! Ah, the illusion's gone. There's nothing to be afraid of, which is exactly the problem. I've jumped 10,000 times in Catalyst, and I felt alive for 2 of them. I've made my point. Now, I'd like to pull Catalyst just a little out of the shadow of Mirror's Edge, to zero in on the experience it can provide instead of what it can't. But of course, there is a question begging to be answered. Which jumps? This one?
This is great! I've reached the top.
And a mirror image up there. You don't need me to say it, but this is the exception. That, Boba Fett, is some fucking perspective. David, meet Goliath. I'm a big fan. Welcome to the Shard. Hours after a catastrophic explosion, where the splinter glass rain falls storming down from Gabriel Kruger's shattered throne room. The entire climb is an exercise in perspective, and its central mechanic is an exercise in risk. This is Catalyst's reflection of the old design, a rebooted Shard, and one that plays far more to Mirror's Edge's strengths. Now it's a horror game, when it works. Half the time you're climbing poles, mindlessly grappling from platform to platform, and the glass mechanic has a few cracks. Yeah, I get the idea, DICE, but instead of running atop the breaking glass, I think I'll just go for the not breaking metal that leads in a straight line from here to my destination. The Shard's got a lot of misses, but for the first time, it's also got the unmissable, which is why it's my favorite mission. It's the final mission, and the only one in the game with an exotic gameplay scenario. Open world could suggest a diluted Mirror's Edge, but that implies a campaign of memorable moments, levels and ideas stretched thin, more filler. Your Mirror's Edging, just about to get to the good bit. Will it ever come? You'll be waiting for quite some time. Kingdom, a secret underground mega-prison, is an interesting concept. The ride up to the dogs, for perspective, is a godsend. The Shard, I'll never forget it. Its peaks are when it's wearing its most flattering dress. Usually, the peaks themselves, but its baseline is climbing unremarkable things with unremarkable effort. Could you say the same for the first game? When the campaign isn't set in the open world, it's mechanically indistinguishable, and so just as damningly trivial. Every level in Catalyst is smooth, every frame a painting. There is nothing frustrating or broken. There is no hole punctured in its design from which it bleeds its potential. The campaign is functional and here, and I'd give it about a 6. Of the 15, 4 missions are set in the open world. Yeah, most open world games would do far more, but this is not most open world games. Most open worlds aren't designed to be traversed numerous times at minimum. Being approachable from any direction, Glass can't slowly complexify its mechanical demand. Needing to withstand repeated use, Glass can't use exotic gameplay to jolt above that baseline. These are things for a campaign. But for an open world, some games like to use police systems. Some games like to use level design to create depth. Some games rely on unleashing their movement mechanics. And Catalyst, the fantasy of open world Mirror's Edge, was pick a direction and go. But with such shallow movement, perhaps fewer pathfinding options for more refined, balanced choices was the right place to try to build depth for Catalyst. Glass wasn't designed by a civil engineer. It's a handful of blended PlayStation 5s, occasionally chained together with matchsticks, 1 or 2 of which are the only ways from zone to zone. Linus Tech Tip's ladder, didn't you know? It's iconic for being the only way from the first half of the map into the second. The visual appeal of open world becomes inverted, as thousands of varying potentials become thousands of exact repetitions. And as for the gameplay, heresy it may be to say, but this design has a potential that with enough choke points, you could unlock a degree of interconnectedness, Metroid-like, where a good, informed choice between multiple balanced options could get you from A to B faster. Sure sounds like it fits the fantasy, but it is itself mere fantasy. There isn't enough connection in Glass for that to happen. And even if there was, you'd still have a problem, because not only do you need to use the choke point, you need to find it. So I'm looking to get to the bay? Any ideas? Conventional wisdom says landmarks should mark choke points from a great distance. The Zephyr Transit Hub is an excellent example. It's massive, it's distinct. But do you see anything? Something like that? Thing is, the Transit Hub is also the only example. This is how you get to the development zone. Right there. The only way is a completely innocuous, broken matchstick that I couldn't see 20 meters out, let alone 200. The entire city center is divided into zones this way, whose connective tissue is invisible until you're staring into the chasms. And as for the bay, swing into someone's apartment from the back of an art museum, of course. But the museum would join the transit hub as an example of Catalyst getting it right. We're the only way in, not hidden amongst a labyrinth of unintelligible lights and shapes. I can't aim for something I can't see from a distance. I can see the Shard or Elysium, as big as they are distinctive, a mile away. I can't see what I need to see until I'm already there. And if the time it takes to find the way is immense, and the time you want it to take in a game about running is not, then we're sitting on a cataclysm. Guess what does know the way? Runner's vision. So that's how I'll get to the museum. Catalyst doesn't just provide full guidance. It doesn't just automatically activate it whenever there's a waypoint. It doesn't just automatically set them whenever you're in a mission or police chase. But it all but forces you to do it manually, even when you're not, because the path is just that obscured. By encouraging use of a sat-nav, the potential for thoughtful pathfinding is inverted, and the average trip through glass in a game desperate for depth becomes a matter of following highlighted instructions. So for all the veterans out there, I hear you. And for everyone else, you ought to know. With practice, you can commit glass to memory, and navigation is not insignificantly more rewarding when you do, but it's like with the first game. The average player will never come close to that point. The average player will never turn off runner's vision, which is why glass is shattered. And we haven't even called the police yet. 911, there's about to be a murder. The model citizen for a good police system serves as a powerful, player-driven stressor on its host game's primary systems. GTA's police isn't a quirk, it's the mechanical ace in the whole that brings the best out of its combat and movement competently, on demand. Mirror's Edge, the police encourage nothing the grid-link sensors that report a static faith to them don't, nor do they require intense performance in any facet of gameplay, even failing as a way to easily engage in combat, because not only is the rate of reinforcement slow, but at heat level 2, the VTOL opens fire, pressuring the player to stay on the move, and so to move away from the fight. Get out of sight, you're told. Easier said than done, but only because it's a lie. The system fails more often than it succeeds, claiming faith is still visible in fully enclosed spaces. Losing detection is only consistent when you escape the blue circle, but it doesn't matter. If you're looking for consistency, a safe house is always your quickest option. So what could have been a pressure for the player to read their environment, and what may trick them into believing it is one, is actually a pressure for the player to thoughtlessly follow the red railroad to the nearest safe house. Ironic, as Catalyst claims enclosed spaces aren't out of sight, safe houses that instantly end the chase are often directly exposed. So, if you wanted the police system to provide an immersive fantasy, you're out of luck. And out of time, because knowing the system's failure gives way to another revelation. I want to do a mission or stare at some pretty fucking colors because staring at pretty fucking colors is my God-given right. And if it's subverted for the equivalent of a buzzing fly, then the smart play isn't running over to a safe house, wasting time getting there and back. It's becoming a pretty color myself. Balancing the depth of a police system is never as simple as it seems, as Watch Dogs has repeatedly proven, but one that's best met with suicide. That's a first. The reach of Catalyst's highest ambitions far exceed their grasp, and their grasp is frankly pitiful. But combat is another branch of the same tree. Let's see if Catalyst can punch its way past its problems.
Submit!
Before we start, does anyone want to get out? I don't even have a gun. Catalyst disarms you for the sake of the parkour runner fantasy. Not a direction familiar to it, but direction is exactly the replacement. Hit enemies into each other or into the environment, and the damage will make it worth your while. This is the fantasy of the parkour runner. Slapstick drunks bouncing like bowling pins from Muppet to moron, or stumbling over waist-high ledges is a circus act to complement the comedy of faith. A master of speed and agility, fighting like a heavyweight brute. Switch Place uses muscle to drag 200-pound fighting men behind you. Attacks are distinct, simple, and impactful, creating an empowering experience that befits Conor McGregor. But the mechanics outweigh the cost. Directional attacks are undeniably deep. The potential to optimize positioning, spatial awareness, and the choice of direction far exceeds the first. And it needed to be so, because there's a problem. It's what the system survives on. Yes, Faith can empower her attacks with movement. The speed, the weight of a wall run or fall is a gravity assist. Her kicks made rockets. The environment is your enemy or ally. The room you're fighting in is a minute reflection of the room to alter your play. There's just one thing though. Why bother? Risk Reward says standard melee is both quicker to end the fight and reliably quicker, but the immediate environment, the location of enemies, that's consistently inconsistent. I could climb up there, assume the enemies won't move, and jump kick down, but I could meet the same ends quicker, and for sure, by fighting on down here. Shock protectors are especially weak to environmental attacks, which could tip the balance. But largely, when environmental attacks are used, they're used reliably. They're reliable as the entrance into an encounter. They're reliable if you can find a reliable wall, outcrop, or ledge to repeatedly exploit, further decohering the player from any semblance of visual fantasy. And that brings us on to Mirror's Edge 1, which must begin with a colossal concession that it did an impressive job of hiding its depth, and only a few ever saw it at the height of its potential. But Catalyst's reflection is given a new clarity through its lens. Light punches were quick, great when in range, a very short range, and with no tracking, Faith was encouraged to use her most stylish moves otherwise. Jump kick, slide kick, wall run kick could spin an enemy round, a low blow could stun at the cost of your speed, and a slide kick could duck underneath an enemy attack, followed by an exclusive recovery strike. Your motives were small, some were contextual, none were perfect, but you had reasons to consider your options. Depth, by definition. In Catalyst, the slide, wall run, and jump kick are meaningfully distinct from a standing strike, only in that they take longer, reducing many worthwhile options to one: heavy and light. One. You'll see. In Mirror's Edge, runner cops could dodge, which encouraged aggressive response to keep the upper hand, and stylish response, because slide and jump kicks had the best tracking, so the best ability to keep the upper hand. They could also counter repeated player attacks, preventing the most exploitable strategies, encouraging consistent variation, and so keeping the depth intact. Over the course of the combat, the energy stayed high, the visual composition stayed strong, but in Catalyst, every enemy is static and similar. Rangers, protectors, shock protectors, sentinels, each have one true ability in a melee fight: punch, with shock protectors having a larger range and sentinels forcing the same 3-second cutscene every time they hit. Being countered, meanwhile, exists solely to give the distinction between light and heavy attacks a reason to exist. See those spunk lollies over there? Light attacks, like environmental attacks, are meaningful right now, before the fight, because if I go in with a heavy, my momentum goes with it. But if I go in with a light, I can keep on running. No compromise. Smart design for an open world. But of course, once I commit to combat, neither have any independently meaningful quality. Light attacks are always best on rangers, heavies are always best on everyone else, and the game knows it, so it casts an illusion by having the protector types and sentinels punish repetition. To respond, you vary between light and heavy until interrupted, you switch targets, or the fight ends. That's not depth, because you don't have a choice. It's visual variation, which they could have had, and depth, if slide and jump kicks had a reason to exist. But they don't, which is exactly the pattern. Options are not being removed. We're not lacking breadth. Reasons to consider them are. And as we lose worthwhile choices, we lose depth. Even a shallow system like Batman Arkham Asylum forces you to rapidly switch between your few options with a rebalancing presence of enemy types. But in Catalyst, enemy design distinguishes the length of their health bars, not the strategies to bring to a fight. If not deep, Asylum was a challenge, and a visually coherent one, but in Catalyst the challenge is staying sane, as the readability of the system is reduced by first person, nonsensical hit ranges, and short telegraphs that can start, connect, and damage inside a single one of Faith's uncancelable attack animations, leaving her helpless. If Catalyst wasn't so easy, its unreliability would be catastrophic, as Faith is stunned and passed around by enemies she can't see and hits that shouldn't connect or couldn't be avoided. But even this was less troublesome in the first, because melee fights kept numbers low, hits reliable, and telegraphs clear. You might be tricked then, since the boss-type Sentinel is usually alone, into thinking this is where things would be at their best. Yeah. He is immune to any light attack that isn't immediately preceded by a heavy. He is far more resistant to directional attacks. Can you see the problem yet, as we're slicing off the faint heartbeat this system survives on? So yes, you have to watch the same animation nearly every time you're hit, but perhaps more pressing is that you have to endure trading between the same attacks until his boss-type health bar runs dry. If you're feeling disco, you could bounce off a wall, and since I'm such a great guy, I'll let you in on a secret. If you want to end things quickly, and you want to end things quickly, there's always the easily exploitable switch place upgrade. Yes, it's just a setup for a heavy. So yes, it's just the same attack again, but there's a mechanical twist. It's broken. Cool, huh? The Sentinel is fucked, beyond all repair, and it's the final boss. Which brings us back to the beginning. Catalyst has directional attacks. The limited depth and visual appeal of this system can just about stretch to service the campaign. Otherwise, it's outdone, threefold, by Minecraft, and so the hunt for depth in Catalyst must go on. There's almost none in the campaign, there's not much in the combat, there's none for the 99% in the open world.
What else is there?
Calm down, we haven't even looked at the side missions yet. You might think I'm at the bottom of the barrel. Yep, but there's a glint. Have we struck gold? The answer to that is kinda, and the reasoning is simple. A great deal of Catalyst's shallowness is rooted in having no reason to think, but races, a time limit, a leaderboard, a 3-star system. On the condition those things are subjectively capable of motivating you, that is a reason. Runner's vision can't get you past that top boundary. Cutting corners can. Developing faster routes where they exist and using advanced movement techniques can, if you're among the 0.1% who watch the right online tutorials, but there's no help for us with the rest of this hunt. See anything? Come on, depth, you can't hide forever, or I'll lose YouTube engagement. Aha! Meta leaks. There are 4 of its kind, a scattering of orbs to collect in time, so you better develop an efficient plan. It's a simple but smart test of planning and execution, a way, perhaps, to do what grid nodes do with a lower budget. There was something hiding behind that fan. A short, dungeon-like test of pathfinding and accuracy, of 3 in total, where a labyrinth of laser grids act as a high-tech band-aid, patching Catalyst's overzealous snap into inputs that need to be considered, while providing a uniquely thoughtful test of pathfinding. There are numerous possibilities. You'll have to think 4 steps ahead to guess right. Mirror's Edge could never be built from slow, small-scale exercises like these. I fully acknowledge, but is that the excuse for there being 7 true tests of platforming in the game, all of which are hidden behind innocuous icons? Well, 9. I can show you exceptions. Mission 6, Runner's vision is turned off and the level invites a second look. It's a weaker, easier and shorter reflection of Kate's tower climb, but it is a reflection, like the one in Rebecca Thane's side mission, if you're among the 15% who did it. And no, that doesn't bring us on to the start of a new point. It brings us to the end, because there is nothing more to find. Mirror's Edge Catalyst is shallow. That's the theme that threads everything we've seen since the Shard together. After the spectacle's dazzling effect grows faint, you can wake up to find you've spent the last 2 minutes on autopilot. What reaches through the screen and drags you out of a daydream? Perhaps about the way, in a grim inversion of its predecessor, Catalyst weakens with time, not as its flaws fade into view, but as its virtues fade out. There's only so long a pretty face stays bewitching. I like Mirror's Edge Catalyst. That might seem hard to reconcile with the hydrogen bomb we just dropped. And don't worry, there's a few more shots to fire before we're through. But it's true, I like it. It feels good. It's pretty. It's not cathartic to dismember it this way, which is why I wish I knew. Like so many others, what happened? How could an open world so backwards in design ever have made it past the drawing board? I've heard things. Some blame the players for pressuring DICE into open world design, but the interviews tell a story of inspiration. The pitches were made and rejected for years until something truly revolutionary landed on Patrick Soderlund's desk. We wanted open world. We wanted side missions. Reading these articles made me feel like I just wasn't in on the gag. The next creative step for Mirror's Edge just happened to be an amalgamation of shorter cell features. Of course, I'm not saying the beautiful Frostbite engine has blood on its hands. I'm just saying the Frostbite engine's difficulty with continuous data streaming might cause problems that look like this, and that the Frostbite engine has been a significant factor in every EA-shaped cock-up for the past 8 years. Assassin's Creed, Witcher, Dying Light. They just keep running. But Mirror's Edge needs to slow down and catch its breath, sacrificing its heart for its skin. It's harder to keep liking Catalyst through this lens, but what choice do we have? It's not a coincidence that everything that screams checkbox feature feels like a checkbox feature. So why don't we start with the features that most resemble a checkbox? The side content. We know there's depth for the few, but what about the majority, who aren't bitterly motivated by an online leaderboard? What does Catalyst have to offer them? Fragile deliveries are about not taking damage, but damage slows you down, so if you were going for speed, you were were already avoiding damage. Diversion simply split objectives into smaller chunks, and covert deliveries would be about stealth, had these actually finished development.
Don't let them spot you.
There's no punishment for being seen. There's no practical way to stay unseen, and every route is littered with enemies, meaning covert deliveries are consistently the most
out of sight.
Yeah, I got it. The most violent events in the game. When you reach your destination, it's as if nothing happened, and
out of sight.
Shut up, man! And every fucking time you pass a grid scanner on a route brimming with grid scanners, you'll get to hear the same line
out
of
of
dialogue.
sight.
By the 300th time, you'll welcome the fucking firing squad. Covert deliveries were thrown in unfinished and have remained in pre-alpha for 6 years.
Thanks. Take it you weren't seen? This will make a difference to the effort.
Yeah, anytime, man. Fucking embarrassing. And doubly important for us, because it means, like the other race types, these are functionally the same thing. You will not consider any one any differently from any other. Security hubs are a police chase, where grid nodes and meta leaks add up to about an hour of gameplay in total. Story-based side missions remain. At their best, you're climbing a tower with a wonderful view, a decent pathfinding exercise, and interesting dialogue, providing narrative context. At their worst, you get a combat encounter in some completely random location and 2 lines of meaningless conversation with an NPC, leaving you baffled as to why there was a narrative context at all. Most are in between, and by most I mean the other 4. Simple, snappy, and better there than not, which could be said for a particularly uninspired Ubisoft game or an MMO. Far from industry standards, far too little to justify its initial price tag, but most of all, far from enough for most to give Catalyst a second wind, following a generally underwhelming campaign. Who wants to go next? How about the thing no review of Mirror's Edge Catalyst can go without mentioning? Security chips, control chips, half the game's collectibles, but more importantly, junk food for neurotics. Porn for your hunter-gatherer brain. That's why it's a war crime they stop you dead to play the same needless animation every time. Their net contribution is slowing Faith down and making a fool of Catalyst's design, because right next door is something better in every way. Grid leaks, which don't slow you down. Saints Row, Web of Shadows. You've seen the idea before, but perhaps not the execution. Thousands of orbs would drag you into a positive feedback loop of micro-reward, where the more you gather, the more your movement ability improved. Mobile game addiction, but they could play a better role on one condition. Present a challenge. In these games, that was a challenge of precision. You have to touch them to get them, and you don't want to waste any time. So precision, a tiny test alone, but together, 100, 1,000, the journey from A to B could be that much more compelling. As your power grew, your skill did too. And Catalyst can't improve your power because levels are designed for specific jump ranges. And they don't improve your skill because precision isn't a thing in Mirror's Edge Catalyst. You'd have a point if you asked what's the point. So here's my point. Checkbox feature. Yeah, but don't think you'll be unrewarded. You get XP to spend in the skill tree. And no, that doesn't change things, because this is the second thing no review of Catalyst goes without mentioning. Why does this game handcuff you by locking fundamental movement techniques behind a skill tree? People often leave out you'll have enough points to match the first Faith in little more than an hour. But what justifies that hour? Mirror's Edge is not and never has been mechanically abstract. Breaking your fall like running is inherently intuitive, and a primitive version that saps momentum isn't held back from the player at all. The timed recovery roll is by 30 minutes minimum. Did a timing challenge so forgiving it's nearly impossible to fail? Risk overwhelming the player more than the instant momentum speed boost with no real human analog that you're given immediately. Tutorialization justifies nothing. With later upgrades, you can climb poles faster, climb ladders faster, and slide for longer. It's a handicap to try for 3 stars or to beat player-made time trials without them. Sound fair? It sounds frustrating to know that I'll need to wait to get on a level playing field. And as for the rest of the tree, fuck, there's a lot to get through. Or so you'd think, until you open it up fresh out of the title drop, to see half of it filled in. Some justified as fundamental abilities like sliding, some justified as having a HUD or having a map. They've harmed the competitive landscape, harmed the first hour, failed to make any of it interesting, and failed to cover up the fact that this is an imposter. Ah, DICE, you sussy baka. They think having a skill tree in a thoroughly incompatible game is more important than you. Diagnosis? They don't think that, but they had to do it. checkbox feature. With the fall of the skill tree, XP is a dead incentive, which leaves the collectibles lacking both quality and motive. Salt in the wound, because much of the side content speaks as if it does.
Script making, opportunity available nearby.
Script? In Glass, script is money. That is what motivates runners to do their work, faith included, as you'll be told repeatedly. Money you'll never actually see, and money you'll certainly never use. But enjoy your XP though, don't spend it all at once. Does the after-image of script seem like the remnant of a system to you? Maybe, but that's not the point I'm making. The point is that it's stupid. Apparently the futuristic conglomerate responsible for bringing you flying ships, mind control, freely moving holograms, and impossible architecture, can't figure out how to keep illegal runners out of the financial system. B, in case you didn't know, or in case you hadn't suspected, this game has a thing or two to say about capitalism. So how about you let me spend my Monopoly money on a fucking tutu or a Supreme hoodie, instead of paying me an exposure? One confused piece in the larger confused puzzle. You want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? Mirror's Edge Catalyst chose the standard dystopia. Capitalism run rampant, a sexy skyline, a subversive cabal of off-grid outlaws. Tick, tick, tick. It's the skill tree of world building, but that doesn't make it bad. The graphics alone immerse when the geography resembles a city and not a nightmarish fractal maze. DICE put real thought into the fashion world, creating sleek styles for the runners and extravagance for the rich. They designed quirks of language, both the naming schemes and the names. A lowercase prefix is followed by a capitalized suffix. Gridlink, lowcast, shotgun. They paid attention to the fictional brands. It turns out, the delivery stations are made by Everdyne, the control chips by Allcom, and I guess Linus works for Callahan. Impressive, immersive, not exactly subversive, but most importantly, surface level. That's the thing about this world. It reflects a perfect image, but apply a little pressure to glass, and it will shatter. So, I'm in a capitalist dystopia, huh? I may be dazzled into believing it. Does anyone down there look up and think of the stars? The so-called employees? No. The skyline is their heaven, the billboards are their Bible, promotion is their ascendance to cherub executive and seraphim director, but only one man sits on the throne, their Lord and Savior, Archangel Gabriel Kruger. And isn't that just the problem? Kruger can't function as the archetype of Bezos because his power doesn't relate to his wealth. He doesn't own the market, he owns the city. He and his conglomerate own the country. He writes the law, his name is on the police force. He owns the ideology, and he owns its adherents. With a change to the contract every citizen is bound to, any form of dissent is a breach of policy, punishable by deportation to the Greylands, an acrid, bomb-beaten desert far beyond Glass, where low-caste slave in mines and food domes. There is no simple way to leave the country, and the two remaining alternative nations are worse. He can't be deposed, unelected, or bankrupted, so script may be power for some, but not for the man with a crown. There is an incoherence between Catalyst's target, capitalism, and the world we actually see that prevents it from meeting its mark. Vast utopian skin stretched over towering capitalist power bases implies a depth that doesn't exist. What is being made here? What is sold and bought? We're told of a city choking on consumerism, but the only products advertised on their towering billboards are inconspicuous jackets, a fragrance, and a headset. Can you see how this links back to what we said about Catalyst's world being divorced from its mind and heart? Would a capitalist dystopia allow half their advertising space to display pretty images? Do Callahan just make ladders and tarpaulin? I'm not asking for an economic report. I'm asking for more to your portrayal of capitalism than words and the existence of large screens. Because whatever role it plays in Glass, the engine of oppression from what is plain to see, is an overwhelming technological power differential as the suit of armor was to the peasant, and nowhere else for the populace to go that allows Kruger to play the role of dictator king. It's difficult to place blame on Kruger's use of anarcho-capitalist ideology to zombify the populace when you've told me he has a gun to their heads, proving it unnecessary. And in its political epilepsy, the only thing Catalyst remains able to critique, even vaguely, is the Industrial Revolution and its consequences. Don't believe me? Then let me show you this game's villain. Kruger may own their world, beliefs, their heaven, and their hell, but Catalyst's central plot device, and so what you might assume is a symbol of its message, is the patent to their souls, reflection, a nanite software patch for the human base code, become the grid. And with the emotional control function they forgot to mention in the press brief, the grid will become you. When you're 2 steps from mind control, ideology means nothing, because thought is a non-factor. When a person has a gun to your head, you don't debate the politics of gun violence. You take the gun. So ANCAP scripture may be religion for the masses, but while the most radical dissenter in Glass tells you as much, Catalyst is silently pointing the finger at whatever it is that crushes rebellion and enforces obedience. No options, and no technological power. And as funny as it would be if it successfully sent a message it wasn't trying to send, there is nowhere Catalyst is not confused. This is a world where breach of policy is punishable by enslavement, and free thought has a few days of life left. So why, at complete random, does it seem easier to rebel in Glass than it is in our world today? Cyberpunk is no different. You have a melting pot of mobs, outlaws, and highwaymen, like an image of the 1930s and 1800s projected onto the future. But the justification is typically that capitalism, in its carelessness for the underclass, has enabled and ignores this reversion. Catalyst forgets its own fiction. It's no 2077. It's a dictatorial conglomerate, fervently opposed to any spark of dissent, with overwhelming power. So when you have a mob boss, Dogan, who inexplicably has these companies by their balls, and highly illegal runners who Kruger wants found at all costs by the end but fails to, you could say some questions are raised, like how a man capable of mind control hasn't figured out how to use a CCTV network, or a public bounty for reporting people seen running on rooftops, or a fucking speed camera. Gridlink scanners will report your presence to KSEC if you stand still too long, but like blasters in Star Wars, tech from 50 years ago would be 50 times more effective. Is this nitpicking? Because I see it as the foundation of the fiction, justification for the primary characters to exist in the way they do, and for the themes to be what they are, but all of it collapses under a featherweight of scrutiny. If it's perfect in any way, it's as proof of my point. Capitalist dystopia with a glowing sci-fi city and misfit dissenters has been done to the point of cliché because it sells. But like every other checkbox feature in Catalyst, it's as thoughtless as it is passionless. Let me ask you this, why is this game called Catalyst? Really, why? The word is rarely used accurately because people want to use it as much as they can because it sounds cool. But dumb subtitles, revenge, extraction, genesis bear some relevance to the subject matter. Catalyst? What, because something happens in the game? No, it's called Catalyst because catalyst is a cool word, because this game has no shame. So here's another abrupt question. Remember Mirror's Edge's song? Those 2 words, still alive, that was a beacon of creative freedom, breaking barriers and going against the grain. Catalyst spat in the face of Still Alive, and I still like it. But there's a reason Catalyst's memory isn't still alive anymore. This game has one last thing to show us, and maybe another chance. The story. Catalyst, do you still have faith? Why don't we cut to the chase? Plastic, the quirky hacker girl, Noah, the wise mentor who preaches non-violence, against more radical mentor Rebecca, who doesn't. Evil big bad Kruger wants to control everyone, obnoxious rival Icarus who eventually warms up to you, and Dogan, calculating dangerous man who has sudden bursts of violence. Catalyst is made from shallow, painfully unoriginal interpretations of various archetypal roles. It's the difference between building upon a template and just using the template stock. Characters don't develop, they don't make tough choices, they don't fall to their flaws. Their relationships are rarely explored and their motivations and desires are either as basic as they can be or empty. Plastic is purely the archetype of her character. She is nothing but quirky hacker girl, as Kruger is the villain, Icarus the rival, and Noah the mentor. The exception to this rule is Dogan, the mob boss, who somehow manages to beat back the tidal wave of conglomerate strength by chopping carrots in a kitchen. But he doesn't like people asking questions, and we're only here for one thing: Dogan's relationship with Faith. It's perhaps the most interesting character beat in the game. His cold pragmatism conflicts with the caring side he doesn't like to show, forcing tough choices and subtly revealing a deeper element to his archetype. Subtly. Catalyst doesn't tell you who he is, so there's also a thin but compelling layer of mystery to his motivations and choices. This encounter happens well into the game, when Faith's debts to Dogen have piled up, but she has no one left to turn to. Take a look.
Get out of my sight before I cut you up for stew. Faith, I'm not in the mood. Do you have the blueprint?
No. And I need a favor.
And a new home, from what I hear. Do you also find it mystifying that I keep on giving and get nothing in return?
Please. I need to find a facility called Kingdom. Noah's being held there.
Kingdom. The conglomerate's dirty little secret.
Do you know where it is? I'll run for you. 5 years, no questions asked. 10 years. 20.
You won't live that long.
That direction is shockingly good for a game so otherwise not. The reminder of Faith's debts is pushed back by her desperation. He's silent, not showing weakness, allowing her to beg, allowing that power balance to shift in his favor, and squaring the conflict of self-interest and care, until finally reaching this.
You won't live that long.
Could be a threat, but from his hesitation, facial expression, and lack of force in his voice, we understand it isn't. It's foresight, it's dejection. The choice to help is made.
Go to rezoning and dig your way down. That's where you'll find Kingdom.
And the scene is all the stronger for having made such strong use of non-verbal communication. The show instead of the tell that is so difficult to artificially create, both in the moment, which is why we perceive it as more honest than words, and for writers, which is why I have nothing but praise for Catalyst's direction. Its mastery of unpredictable lifelike naturalisms was actually stunning. Noah double-taking to get the voice rec software to work as the dialogue equivalent of Metro offsetting its HUD to diegetic information sources.
This game has no damn logic.
You'll get used to it. Faith used to beat me all the time.
Still could. You had a run for me?
I do. On. Elysium.
Parts of this are so natural they almost feel improvised, and it's a great example that acting, voice, and body is remarkably strong, while the dialogue they have to sell is remarkable in its own way.
What about the employees here?
What about them?
Just what I thought. I'm getting them out, Dogen. The fire alarm should do it.
Whatever. If you ask them nicely, I'm sure they'll leave obediently.
For a video game, it's not half bad. Characters speak with a specific style, their personalities clash believably, and they refer back to their histories too.
If anything happens to her, Dogen, they'll go berserk, I'm sure. We've had this discussion once already.
It's not great, but it's certainly not bad, which combined with acting and a lifelike presence to these characters means though archetypal, they play their hollow roles well. Plastic should be obnoxious. I think she's quite endearing, and it probably goes without saying that Frostbite's gorgeous renders contribute a fair deal, but there's more to this than meets the eye. Like where the eye is. Third person. Not first. Catalyst is under no delusion it'll make the player one with Faith. This time round, we're on the outside looking in. It's a complexified world, and Faith is no longer a vessel or a symbolic character. She's meant to have a depth to her, a realness the first one never had, conflicts.
In the meantime, I believe a show of good faith is in order. Pardon the pun.
What? He stole my joke! Well, we'll fucking begin anyway. See if I care. Catalyst's Faith has the personality of a slightly rebellious 16-year-old girl.
Thought you were taking a nap. Isn't that what old people do?
The once hyper-pure blend of elegance and confidence has been complexified into the character equivalent of Catalyst's campaign. Something remarkably unremarkable. Faith isn't funny, she isn't badass, she lacks any admirable quality, or frankly any distinct quality at all. Dullness isn't a death sentence if she acts as a receptacle for the audience, but Catalyst does not take this path. It isn't a death sentence if there's an underlying depth, an effective intrigue to her inner world. Something, for instance, that would explain why she does what she does. Is there? Action reveals character, and Faith's action speaks loudly. She says she's confident, ready to sacrifice her life without fear, question, or hesitation. So what's in her head? Mental illness? Heroism? Belief? Thrill-seeking? Revenge? conglomerate killed her family, she's got a reason to hate them, but you wouldn't know it without being told. Hatred or trauma isn't an active part of her character, leaving the dullness just dull, and her doe-eyed teenage personality inexplicable. Fearless obsession is contrasted against a personality written and voiced like she doesn't even want to be there.
I do take sides. Our side. So yeah.
This character was once the embodiment of human life. She is now so lifeless, it's actually jarring.
I once knew a young woman who would defy anyone and anything, even me, in order to do what she felt was right. But you're clearly not her.
Couldn't have fucking said it better myself. And despite the fact that DICE write themselves every opportunity to expand on Faith's character, they trip over their shoelaces not to take them. This is complex, so let me take you to the inciting incident of Mirror's Edge Catalyst. If complexity means flaws, then Faiths are exhibited inside Elysium. It's a simple data grab while Icarus supervises you from outside. He's been giving you nothing but shit for having a reputation, being dangerous, sloppy. We get the data, but then Faith entirely disregards Noah's commands, investigates something she has no reason to believe is valuable, but every reason to believe is dangerous, steals a phone from Gabriel fucking Kruger, her full figure in full view, and runs back to the lair with it in tow. Why?
Could be worth enough to solve things with Dogen.
Yeah, or enough to see us dead.
2 hours later.
You there, Icarus?
Now, in most stories, this physical consequence would have a profound mental one. Both would occur because the story is trying to deal with the flaw that caused it. Catalyst's got a different technique. Pretend like it never happened. It's weird enough that the same Faith who has a well-performed but ultimately meaningless breakdown later in the game for something that wasn't technically her fault doesn't even register the fucktacular hypernova she let off right here. But you want to know what's even weirder? Icarus doesn't either. The rival who has wanted nothing but for Noah to see Faith for the fuck-up she is, after having watched his cabal die because of a moment of arrogance that he specifically complained about, doesn't even acknowledge it. Inexplicably, he warms up to Faith instead. Her motives aren't explored and basic consequences are forgotten about. It's as if they're actively forsaking their own opportunities to expand Faith's character. Man, imagine if they did it again. Meet Cat. No, not that cat, but she's still cute. The fucking character arc isn't. It turns out Faith's sister never died with her parents. Kruger took in and raised her as his daughter. Perhaps she's a representative of the false identities created by ideology and the enslavement that enables. That might actually work, if you heard it from the game. DICE go above and beyond to leave their characters static and shallow. In the world's first script diagnosable with dementia, it's an incoherent mess where plot is illogical, theme is confused, and character forgets itself. It's a story where excellent acting sells emotionless writing, and overall, I'd say it was a pleasant surprise. Oh, it was crap, but it wasn't painful. It was short, pretty, mildly entertaining, and unobtrusive. How perfect. Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Quick, pretty, mildly entertaining, and unobtrusive, which is why I still like it, even though its name is as symbolic as Still Alive, a symbol to its betrayal. Catalyst is worthy of your time. The devs are worthy of respect, not so sure about their product. Maybe one day, like Deus Ex, they'll be given another chance. Will they? Probably not, but that's not the point of Faith. Special thanks go out to Bishop Nelson, Chase Baker, Chino, Diseased, Dr. Pavel, Duncan Austin, Effectfully, G-Series, I Know Lucky, It's Not V, JD, John Lemley, Caleb Doss, Kanra Hatake, Lex Williams, L. Hudson, MT the Poet, Newts, Soren66, The Wayfinder 12, William Vossler, Warthol, Abby, Adam Abuela, Andre Baltuta, Attila, Bloth, Blue Eyes White Idiot, Bogdan Hraska, Bozian, Brandon Harris, Brendan McDonald, Caleb Finnemore, Cale Quinn, Calvin Black, Carlos Skibber, Chance Tucker, Christy, Chris P, Christopher Richardson, Colby the Ranchman, Combat Wombat, Cyril Bensiman, Dan Walker, Darren Chambers, Deluxo, Devontae Williams, DJ, Dominic Jaworski, Drop ZZ, Dubstep Gutterfan 92, Enzo, Eric Mahal, Glorious Sexy Beast, Gwyneth, Gerald, Hypocrite, Holy Shift. I joined Tier 3 because I wanted to hear Whitelight say this out loud. Yep, very, very smooth. I pay my cam girl, so why not you? Jake Dunnigan, Jake and Tipton, JD Soul, Joe Simmons, Jonathan and Milo, Joshua W. Schreiner, Justin Casper Schmidt, Leon Kuttendall, Liam Duffy, Lorenzo Vecchio, Lubomir Mitkov, Malone Patron, Nathan, Navy Husky, Nines, Norm Ambroise, Rakin Hock, Sad Cabbage, Shade, Shrupp, Tax One Cab, That's for the Birds, The Last Great Opium Den, Trending Tech, Vertigious, Vladimir Obakov, and ZZZZZZ2468.